What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Girls with Goals with your hosts, Anne Catherine.
And Caroline. And there's a question that I want to answer, which is, do you have to break old habits to build new? And can you break bad habits in general? Because we talk a lot about healthy habits here. We talk a lot about building habits. But what about bad habits? Because there are also bad habits that I know I have, or not necessarily bad habits, but things that don't really serve me, things that don't feel good, things that I notice myself doing, or patterns that I notice
differently.
Yeah, that I want to break. And so I've been questioning, is it possible to just break a bad habit? Or do you have to build a new one on top of it? Or do you have to break old habits before you build new ones? Kind of like, how does that work? So we've been talking about this, we've been thinking about this. And we also are starting a mini habit series that is starting later this week. So if you're listening when this episode comes out on Monday, our first mini healthy habit episode is coming out on Thursday. So if you're listening after this episode first comes out, then the series has already kicked off and you guys can go listen to that too.
So every week we're going to be talking about a new specific habit, and we'll go through why it's important, why we make a point to have these habits in our lives, and why you should too. Because honestly, the ones that we have pulled for the series are the foundational, important ones that everyone should be doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so with that, we're going to be taking you through how to instill each of those habits, why they're important. But I feel like before that, I want to talk about the foundational ideas of building habits, breaking habits, and kind of understand them a little bit more. Do you have to break old habits to build new ones? I feel like this came up for me because I feel like I am in a place where I have a lot of good habits that have been consistent for a really long time now. In Catherine and I talk a lot about how fitness is always a consistent habit for me. Sometimes it's harder to do than other times. Sometimes it looks different than other times, but that's a very consistent habit for me, and probably the most consistent in my life. And then I also have other healthy habits, a daily walk is so consistent. Reading is usually so consistent. Cooking good food is typically pretty consistent. Things like that. But that doesn't mean that everything that I do is perfect. At all, or that my lifestyle is perfect. There are so many habits that I also notice that I have that don't really serve me. I recently found out that I had mono for the past few months. I thought that for the past few months, I was so energy drained. I was so lethargic. I couldn't wake up early. I was exhausted all the time. I was so many of my healthy habits were slipping, and I thought that it was my problem. And I was like, oh my God, how do I stop this? How do I fix this? Well, I recently found out that I had mono. So there's a bit of an explanation there. But I'm kind of in a phase of trying to build back those habits now that I feel like I have my energy back. But I've noticed that a lot of the habits that I fell into when I was sick are now things that I kind of want to break. And a lot of that is when I was sick, I was sleeping in so late, and so I wasn't really taking advantage of my morning. Now that I'm waking up early again, I find that sometimes I'm too slow in the morning and I'm wasting time and I'm losing the purpose of even waking up early. So that's definitely something that I noticed that I want to fix.
That's a huge reason why I don't like slow mornings.
Mm-hmm.
Slow mornings are not for me. If they're for you, that's great. That's so fun. I can't do it because I end up just wasting my morning when I have a slow morning. And I'm this time would have been better served if I had just slept.
Exactly. And I enjoy that sometimes, but for the most part, I'm if I'm waking up 6 a.m., I've been much more consistent about waking up early now, but then I find that I'm almost an hour or two will go by before I really even start myself and do anything. And I'm okay, what was the point of this? Because I really kind of just sat around for a couple hours, and maybe I'll read a little. Maybe I'll play with the dog, I don't know, but I'm not really doing anything with that time. And so I want to shift that habit to, if I already have the habit of waking up early and I'm bringing that back, I want to override this habit of wasting a couple hours of my morning with getting my morning started and, doing my exercise then, doing something else then. So that's definitely a big one for me right now that I'm trying to override or break, if you will.
A huge thing for habits too is your environment. And I know that we've talked about this a lot because we're in college, and the nature of our lives is that every few months we pick up and move just based on one semester we were in classes, one semester we're abroad, and then we're home, and then we were working, and then
our
it's just a lot of
moved a lot in the
switching
past
up,
few years.
Which is normal when you're in college and doing that, but it makes it really difficult for habits to stay executed in the same way. So can I talk about this on the front of working out and eating healthy and getting enough sleep, which I do not get enough. But those habits stay intact whatever environment I'm in. It's just that they are executed differently. So when I was working in Boston 9 to 5, I was on a strict schedule of like I wake up at this time and I go to the gym and then I go to work and then I come home and then I cook this type of meal, more regimented, and it fostered some really strong habits in that sense of like working out in a very certain way to a certain caliber, if you will. And that felt really good in the moment. Now that I'm home, mentally I want to continue giving that amount of effort to working out and eating healthy and those habits, but I can't. My environment doesn't foster that because I'm not, if I woke up at 5 a.m. like I do in Boston here, I'm just in my house. And so that's when I feel like, oh, I'm kind of wasting time because I could absolutely like wake up, go to the gym, blah, blah. But I'm like still in my house and I'm not filling my time as much because I'm not required to fill my time as much when I'm here. In the same sense, like our parents are here. I'm not cooking just for one person. We'll have like family dinners. If I were grocery shopping for myself, I would buy different things that would the whole family. Yeah, than we do for the whole family. And so the environment just fosters different things. Not to say that I'm not still waking up early and working out and eating well. It just looks very different, and I think that is a hard thing for me to like wrap my head around and mentally be like, oh, this is still effective and working and like a valid habit to have. Having to change like the level of exercise I'm doing, an intensity of exercise I'm doing, a type of exercise I'm doing. Also, it's summer, so that changes a lot too. Yeah. You're outside more, you're getting exercise through a lot of different things. But I think my biggest thing right now is trying to figure out where those habits fall and what I want them to look like.
Yeah. That also made me think during the school year when we were at school, like my days were filled with pretty much independent time for myself. Like we were always working during the day and everyone else has classes too. You're not all that social during the day. And so it worked that then I would be much more social at night. Like I would have dinners with friends at night. I was going out a lot more on the weekends, I think, last semester than I had in the past. And so now I've come home for the summer and I feel like we've been quite social for the summer as well, but I feel like I'm getting burnt out by it a little bit because it's different now where my full day isn't independent to myself and I'm working the whole time. Like it's now sunny, so I'm gonna take a break and go to the beach during the day. I'm gonna hang out with my family during the day, and so I feel like I'm less like strictly productive and strictly independent during the day. So then when I'm filling all of my afternoons at home too with functions with friends and things like that, I feel like I want to shift that habit and pull that back a little bit and be like, I can still have the same balance between independent time and social time. But because I'm being much more social and doing more things through the day naturally during the summer, I kind of want to like taper back nights a little bit just to make sure that I still stay on top of all of the things that I want to do and have that same balance.
But then in the summer, like,
but it's also
there are night
fun.
Activities too.
There are night activities
too.
You
want to do
all
the activities. So it's really hard to be like, do everything at once.
I know. So I guess I don't know. I don't necessarily know if there's like a habit there that I want to break, but it's definitely something I want to be conscious about. But when you talk about like your workout routine changing, is it the thought pattern of like this isn't effective enough that you want to change, or is it like an actual action that you kind of want to shift?
I mean, physically, I just know I'm not doing as much as I was doing in Boston because I was going so wild when I was there because I had nothing else to do. Like no one was there. It was literally just me. And so I used that extra time to go so hard. And now I'm completely in the opposite direction where, like, we are home for the summer. It's hot. It's sunny. It's, like, beaches. I'm trying to be in the ocean as much as I can. Like, there's always something going on. I'm so socially busy.
Yeah.
And, like, mentally I want to be social and, like, out and about and doing activities and, like, enjoy the summer and eat up what, like, it's just so fun. Why would I not want to be at the beach? Why would I choose
saying that you want to change and like exercise more intensely right now? It's more so like
I mean, I do want to exercise more intensely. The other thing is just like the mental capacity of like being home in your hometown in like your childhood bedroom. It's just so unmotivating. It drains you so hard. It's crazy. And like it's just so tough. I will go to the gym and be like, I just don't want to be here. Like, I would rather be doing literally anything else, and then I'll leave. Yeah. And I just can't get myself to, like, stay and do that. So that's another thing that's, like, your environment stays. Well, no, because I'll, like, go for a run, and I'm active all day during the day. Like, even if I am doing activities, it's like, oh, we're walking here. We're like, it's sunny. We're swimming in the ocean and blah, blah. It's, like, it is naturally in the summer you do more. So I'm like, from a health perspective, I'm set. I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm happy. Just like from a mental habits thing, I want to still be in the, you feel so accomplished when you're like doing hardcore workouts. So I would like to do more, but also I'm like, to be honest, I'm like working 3 jobs and trying to be social this summer, and like I'm tired and I just don't have enough energy or time to put like 2.5 hours a day into my workouts. Like, it's going to be a 45-minute situation.
And that's okay. Ratio rule. We're just
Ratio
shifting for a
rule.
little
We're
bit.
shifting, and that's fine.
So to understand if we have to break old habits to build new ones, or how to break the habits that we don't want to have anymore, I think it's first important to understand how habits work in general. Sometimes we overlook the fact that literally everything we do, every action, every thought, is a habit. It's triggered by some sort of routine that we've built in our bodies, in our minds. And I won't dive into habits and the science behind it way too much right now, because we actually have a recent episode where we did that. We had Shelby Sacco on. She was an incredible guest. She's super educated about habits and in these topics. So I highly suggest, if you haven't listened to that episode, after you listen to this, or even now, whatever, listen to that episode.
Finish this
episode and then listen to that another time, because it'll educate you a ton about the system of habits, whereas we'll just break down kind of like the basics of it right now. But that's a great episode. But every habit, it comes down to even the thoughts, like what you think of yourself when you wake up in the morning, what you think when you step into a gym and when you go into a different environment, what you think when you walk past a certain group of people, down to what you do when your alarm goes off. Do you snooze it? Do you keep it going? What you eat
I'm a huge advocate for do not snooze.
Right, because then you hit a habit.
Do not
snooze. What you do.
snooze.
Like, every little action and every big action and every pattern in your life is a habit. And every habit is broken down into a cue, a routine, a reward, and then is built through repetition. So let's take the alarm clock example, because Captain said she's not a fan of snoozing her alarm. The cue is your alarm goes off in the morning. Your routine, that's the action that you do. Do you snooze it, or do you get out of bed and you wake up? And then the reward is whatever you get from that. So if you get out of bed and you wake up, then the reward you're giving yourself is that you have more time in the day, you feel super accomplished, you feel good about yourself because you got up and you got your day going. The reward, if you snooze your alarm, is it feels really good to get a few extra minutes of sleep. Sometimes that reward in the moment overrides the other one and it feels much better. That's why we do it. But then the repetition comes when you repeat that cue, routine, reward over and over, and you have the repetition with it. Then you've built a habit so that every time that cue happens, your body and your mind naturally go to do that routine because you know that you're going to get that reward. Do you see what I'm saying? And that is what you can think about to build good habits and to teach yourself good habits that you're going to stay consistent with. But that's also what happens when we have these habits that we don't think are that great, but we continue to do them because we haven't broken down what that pattern is and what we're actually doing. So we continue to go through that routine of whatever it is that is like not necessarily the best. Take my I wake up early and I'm kind of wasting time example. My cue is my alarm goes off at 6 or whenever it goes off and I get up. My routine is that I then just laze around the house for like an hour, because the reward for me is that I'm not having to exert that much energy, and it feels calming to do that versus it feels a bit more intimidating to immediately go and like exert myself through a workout. So I've taught myself that that's the reward, that I get to like wake up early and feel accomplished by that, but then I just chill and it's not that hard for me. And then I continue to repeat that so that becomes my routine. If I wanted to break that, I would have to break down, okay, my cue, I wake up at 6 a.m. My new routine is going to be that I work out, and my reward is that I'm going to feel so great after I work out and so energized. I'm going to have so much more time in my day because I've gotten my workout out of the way early in the morning. And then I also get to have an amazing post-workout meal that feels 10 times better because I've exerted energy, and now I'm going to like drink a refreshing smoothie kind of thing. But those are a little bit more of delayed rewards, so it would be a little bit harder for me to input that. But by breaking down what that pattern is, I can go in and replace the routine and decide I'm going to keep the same cue. I'm replacing this routine for these new rewards. And then the more that I repeat that, the more that is going to become my new routine. So that is like a very basic definition of kind of the science of habits and how it breaks down.
Yeah, so for more, definitely go listen to the episode we did with Shelby, because we go way more in depth with her, or more examples too, which is great. So if you are interested in that, then go listen to that. But we're going to get into, do you have to break old habits to build new ones, more in the sense of this is my experience and my opinion of whether or not you can break old habits or if you should be breaking old habits in order to build new ones. So when you are breaking a habit, I think we want to break habits in order to replace them with something else. Almost every single time. I can't at this moment think of a time when I would like want to break a habit without putting something new in.
Or when it's even really possible to break a habit without replacing it with something new.
Well, yeah, because think about it. If you're like, oh, I want to stop drinking coffee. You're drinking way too much coffee and it's not making you feel good and blah, blah, blah. You want to stop drinking coffee. So when you eventually stop drinking coffee, you're not just going to never drink anything again. Like, you're going to replace that with something. Maybe it's a glass of water. Maybe it's soda water. Maybe it's like iced tea. Maybe it's something. But that action of like drinking coffee, and maybe it's prompted by you're thirsty, maybe it's prompted by you want energy, maybe it's prompted by it's just something you do in the morning. You wake up, you go downstairs, turning the coffee pot on is a habit. It's going to be replaced by something. It's not just going to be an empty thing. And it doesn't even have to be like, oh, morning cup of coffee. It could be like, oh, morning banana.
True.
Morning walk. It could be something, but it's something you do in that moment for the desired outcome, because you drink coffee because you want energy and it's like comforting and it's part of your routine.
Yeah. So what are you getting out of that? And then what is the cue of it? Likely it's you wake up in the morning. Like, that's your cue. It's the morning. And then your routine is drinking coffee because it feels good and it's warm and it gives you energy. Or it's cold if it's iced coffee.
And it's just an enjoyable experience. So if you want to replace that, your morning, daily, energizing, enjoyable, calming experience could be going for a walk. It could be playing music. It could be drinking a different drink, iced tea, something with less caffeination. It doesn't have to be a direct substitution, which I think is really important, and especially important when understanding that I don't think you can break a habit without creating a new one.
Yeah, because it might not be quite as obvious. The most obvious would be I'm replacing coffee with tea sort of thing. I'm replacing coffee with water.
Right, so you may not even liken the two habits that you're swapping out for each other as direct substitutions, because they aren't. But the new habit that you put in place, whether or not you realize it, is a substitution for whatever habit you just broke, because you're getting the same outcome and feeling and like reaction from yourself. Yeah. So if you stop drinking coffee, you now have more time and more like space in your morning. You can go for a walk. Like, there's something missing from your morning routine that now you have time to go for a walk. So those could be direct substitutions for that habit, for that cue and that desired outcome.
Also, the cue will likely never go away, because usually we're not creating a cue. Usually it is a feeling that we have. It's a certain time of day. It's a certain action that's inevitable in your day. Like, a cue could be every time I'm stressed, these are the things that I do. A cue could be every time I wake up, this is the first thing that I do. A cue could be every time I clock out of work, this is immediately what I do after. Usually there are inevitable feelings and inevitable times that happen. So it's impossible to just get rid of that habit completely, or get rid of a habit, because there's always going to be something you do. The first thing that you do when you clock out of work for a day, there's always going to be the first thing that you do when you go downstairs after waking up. So you have to override it with something new. And in order to do that, it's important to figure out, what is this habit that I actually do? What is the cue that I'm starting from? Because then you know where to place the new routine. Is it immediately after you wake up? Is it like you snooze your alarm immediately when it goes off? Or is it, I drink coffee when I go down and I have like 3 cups and I only want to have 1 cup and I want to replace the other things with something else, kind of thing. You have to figure out what that cue is, and then what the reward is that you're getting from it, and then what is something that feels healthier to me, it feels more productive to me, that would fit in that slot. And then you can replace it. I don't think just because the cue never goes away and you're always going to crave some sort of reward in that sense, that you just get rid of the routine altogether. So you have to override it with something else. And because of that, I think that suits to answer the question of, do you have to break old habits to build new ones? Maybe you don't have to break old habits to build new ones, but you might have to build new ones to break old habits.
Yeah.
you might have to build a new one to override the old habit, because it's hard to just wipe something away in completion.
Yeah, I don't think you necessarily have to break a habit. I think it's a natural reaction of building a new one. But you do have to build a new one.
Yeah.
In order to progress and level up those habits, or just make your life and those habits better.
Another thing that I think about a lot when breaking habits and overriding habits is that I don't think that the old pattern ever completely goes away. You have wired a pattern into your brain, into your body, and you may override it with something else, and then you may override it with something else and have enough repetition that this new pattern becomes stronger. But I don't think that your brain or your body ever fully forgets the old pattern. And I think that you get better at not just listening to that craving immediately, but like sitting back and observing it and recognizing that it's a pattern and actively choosing to cut in and stop it with something else. I think that's what happens at first, is that the first step is that, okay, I know what this pattern is. And then when you feel it start to happen, instead of immediately diving into that craving, you more so observe, oh, this is the pattern that I'm trying to follow because this is hardwired in me. But I'm going to choose to replace it with this new thing right now and see how I feel. And then you feel that maybe you get the same reward or a new reward from that. And then the more that you repeat it, the more that you can override that old pattern with this new pattern. But I really don't think that the old one ever goes away completely. I think that there's always still going to be that path in your brain there. You just get a lot better at doing something else instead, or something else becomes a stronger pattern.
It's always going to feel, because obviously, say you break the habit of snoozing your alarm. And now, for the past year, whenever your alarm goes off and you set an alarm, you get up to it. But then there's a day when you're really, really tired and you do snooze your alarm. That's going to feel really comfortable because that's like a known behavior. And it's not that, oh, this habit, this like bad habit that you broke is taking over. You actively made the decision to go back into that habit. Whenever the cue comes, you make the decision every time based on what you want to do. But through repetition, it gets easier and easier to choose that habit. So that's why maybe habits that you don't want to continue being a part of your daily routine or reaction to the cue continue to happen, because the more you do them, the deeper you get into them, which means the harder it is to get out of them. At the same time, you can always make a decision to change your reaction to that cue as long as you're aware of it, which is why when you do choose to like snooze your alarm, which is totally fine on an occasion, it's going to feel comfortable, and it's like because it's a known behavior. So that understanding of that cue never goes away, but I do think you can make it way, way easier for yourself to choose different directions as you repeat and repeat the better habits that you choose for yourself.
Yeah. It's like when you hear people who have struggled with addictions in the past and they describe how, like, I still wake up and I make the choice to stay clean or whatever it is every day, because that becomes more of your pattern and you've overridden the pattern. But your brain never forgets what the old pattern was, and you still have to be strong in making that decision every day. But through repetition, you show yourself, oh, I can do this different thing, and also the new thing, you see the rewards of it, and it becomes more of that pattern. In that same sense, though, you can't expect to decide one day I'm going to override this habit and expect yourself to then be perfect for it for the rest of your life. And that is not your fault. That is like literally, it scientifically makes sense because you still have this other wired pattern in your brain. And I know for me, when I pick up a new habit or something, there's a lot of excitement around doing something for the first week or even the first couple weeks. You're fueled a lot by the newness of it and the excitement of it, that it's probably easiest to do that for the first week or even the first 2 weeks, and then you may find yourself hitting a bit of a plateau after that where the excitement is kind of worn off a little bit, but you haven't fully overridden your old habit with this new thing, and now you're feeling a bit more resistance, and that's kind of the breaking point where it's going to be a lot harder to stick with it. And you might have days where you revert to the old pattern and you slip up, and that is okay. That makes sense because you haven't broken that pattern. You haven't fully created this new pattern yet. But don't let that let you revert back to your old ways entirely, completely. Like, you're not going to be perfect for every single day of your life. And so if you revert back to something else and it happens, recognize that, but also understand that, like, that is just kind of part of the process, and don't let that stop you from continuing to choose your new habit every time.
Mm-hmm. It's like, if you were to wake up early for the airport or to go watch sunrise with your friends, even if you did it like 4 days in a row, if you were doing it with your friends for something exciting and different, mm-hmm. like, you're gonna get up. You're gonna have no trouble getting up. You're not gonna be like, oh, let's wake up for sunrise tomorrow and be excited about it and want to do it and then, like, snooze your alarm. But, like, but I would never book myself to go see a sunrise and then not wake up and immediately get out of bed and, like, go do my thing. Mm-hmm. That said, when it's just another day and you've done it 16,000 days in a row, you might be, like, forcing yourself to get out of bed mm-hmm. a little bit more because the excitement's worn off. Mm-hmm. And it's not, you no longer have that extra burst of energy pushing you to do it. It's no longer new. It's no longer, like, fun and fresh. It just is your normal daily habit, and then it becomes a little bit more mundane. Mm-hmm. I do think it's interesting. I want to go back to talking about, like, addiction. In this sense, obviously we're using lighthearted examples so that it just the concept applies to everyone. Yeah. We understand that this applies to things that are so much deeper and more impactful. Yeah. And that it is the same kind of circle of life and, you know, cue habit situation going on. But of course, not everyone is going to relate to the wild extremes, and a lot of people are going to relate to wild extremes and everything in between. So we're using lighter examples that are like blanket statement, fill in the blanks, put your own situation in there.
Daily routine, daily healthy habits.
But I do think it's interesting on the front of, like, addiction habits and people who are, like, recovered addicts, the extent of the habit, like, the substitutions of the habit. Like, there's so many people who were addicts and they've now replaced it with, like, going all in
with exercise.
And I think, like, No Mulkey on TikTok, the, like, mm-hmm. Iron Man, that is such a prime example of, like, he was an addict for a long time and is now an insane Ironman athlete. Yeah. And the substitution of the habit, because that's, like, on a macro level, was a habit. Like, the amount of effort and intensity that goes into addiction and exercise can be in the same amount. You know what I mean? Right. But obviously very different applications and different reactions, but what you do get is you still get the dopamine release. You get the, like, sense of accomplishment when you finish a race or, like, putting yourself through something really challenging. Yeah. And they're very, very, very different applications, but they're the same intensity and very similar if you on paper, like, put down what you're getting out of each experience, whether it's addiction or, like, intense exercise in this case. It's really easy to see how those are direct substitutions, and obviously one is healthier than another.
Yeah, I remember, because you follow him and you showed me some of his stuff. Sometimes I
love him.
Yeah, but his exercise, I mean, he's an insane, intense athlete, like, very extreme. And I remember, like, he'll get comments from people being like, you're literally just, like, addicted to being an Ironman and addicted to exercise
he's
now.
Like, yes.
And he was like, yes, I have an addictive personality, but this one keeps me alive. Yeah, I thought that was, like, super interesting.
Because if you have a wild addiction to drugs or alcohol or whatever it is, break that habit. Mm-hmm. What do you, like, you're not just gonna sit around.
Yeah, what are you left with?
You could sit around, but then if you sit around and don't do anything instead, it's gonna be a lot easier to fall back into that, or mm-hmm. But if you distract yourself or fill your time with something else, even if it is intense Ironman training, mm-hmm. It's still, like, a very, very hard thing, obviously, to recover and be recovered from addiction. But you're filling that space. You're creating a new habit to break the old one.
Yeah.
And I don't think you could do it if you just simply broke that habit and didn't fill your time with something else. It doesn't have to be addiction to exercise. It could be obviously anything, and it could be like, oh, maybe you get really into, like, pottery or, like, mm-hmm. art or start a business, but on that level it needs to be something that is also intense and consuming and satisfying and mm-hmm. you know, meet the same rewards that you were getting from the first habit.
Yeah. So we've talked about very day-to-day lifestyle examples, then this very extreme example. I also want to touch on our thought patterns a little bit too, because those are things that we can override as well. I was thinking something that I think I have gotten better and like overridden, is overridden a word? I've been able to override a bit, is if I like made some sort of mistake in school or in work or in something like that in the past, I definitely would tend to stress about it and like spiral about it a little bit and be like, oh my god, all these people think this of me, I've ruined it, like I don't know, I've ruined my reputation with them, I did a bad job, blah blah blah. And maybe not even just in like school and work, but also maybe like socially, things like that. I don't know, I feel like I'm a bit of an overthinker. I can be a bit of a stressor. For the past year, I've literally just been telling myself when something like that happens, I'm like, I'll survive. And like I just kind of try to replace my thoughts with that, like it's literally not the end of the world, I'll survive. And I almost just don't let myself go down that path. So when I feel a cue happening of like, oh, I'm starting to overthink this, I'm getting stressed about this, I feel like I did a bad job about this, and I know that my typical routine would be to kind of stick on that and like grind my gears around it, I've replaced that with being like, those thoughts don't serve me, that happened, I'll survive, my life will go on. And my life is like 10,000 times better because of it, because I'm not sitting with those negative emotions. I'm able to be much more realistic about like the scope of things, because usually things are literally not the end of the world and you will survive. And also I'm able to move on way better and just like continue with my life. And so that can be applied to any sort of thought pattern, whether it's like you feel a lot of social anxiety sometimes, maybe when you're with a group of people, your brain starts to be like, oh my god, I don't like how I look compared to these people, and people don't like me and they're judging me. If you know that your cue being around certain groups of people or in certain environments, you always kind of go to that anxious thought pattern, maybe you actively try to replace that with something else. Maybe you actively try to tell yourself, I am great, nobody is thinking about me, everyone's too focused on themselves, and I'm gonna focus on myself and have a good time. Like maybe you find some sort of sentence or mantra or affirmation that you replace that with, and then every time you're
favorite affirmation, no one cares.
No one cares. So that is our take on how you could override different sorts of habits that you want to replace in your life. A couple other ideas that I would think about when we're thinking about, oh, I want to change this habit and override this habit with something new, is the cue something you can get rid of? Because I know I said before that usually the cue is not something you can get rid of. It's a feeling that you feel, it's a time of day. But is your cue, is this like a stacked habit? Is it following something else you do that maybe also isn't serving you? Because a lot of the time, healthy habits stack together and also unhealthy habits stack together. So if your cue is something that already doesn't need to happen in your life, go to the root of it. And what is the first thing that you do that usually sets off this chain reaction of other bad habits? And try to just knock that out first and get rid of that one and replace that one first. And then you're probably knocking out a lot of other things that come along the line. So other than our typical approach of how you would choose a habit that you want to override, break down the cue, routine, the reward, change the routine, repeat it, find the new reward in it, I would also look at, okay, is that cue something that can go to begin with? Is that cue another not serving me habit that can just go to begin with? And then my other suggestion would be, can you find some sort of negative in that reward? I think something that a lot of people message us about, I think that a lot of people just experience, is like that nighttime snacking or like leaning towards nighttime binging kind of behavior. I think a lot of people experience that. And obviously the reward that you're finding in the moment is an immediate dopamine hit. It's an immediate, this tastes good. It's an immediate, I'm filling my stomach. But I think that everyone that experiences that would also say, then you feel immediately gross right after. So that would be the negative. Like, can you find that negative in the reward and then remind yourself of that and override it? A lot of situations where we have habits that we want to break, there's probably negative pieces to it that are driving us to want to break those habits. So can you remind yourself of that negative and focus on that negative more so than the reward that you're getting from it too?
I think that all comes down to just like awareness of the entire like cue, routine, reward. Because if you're not aware of it, I mean, literally with everything, you can't change something that you're not aware of.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to understand something before you can actually take action and make changes, because you need to know what you want to change, because you're not going to change every single part of it. You could change the cue, you could change the routine, and you can change the reward. But you need to understand what those parts are and what parts you do and don't like about those in order to actually make changes and make it a better habit overall.
Mm-hmm.
But to answer our initial question of do you have to break old habits in order to build new ones, I don't think you break the habit to then build a new one. I think you build a new one, and that's what breaks the habit.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have to break old habits to build new ones? No. Because when you build new ones, the old habits are going to go away because you're over it. So the first habit that we're going to be talking about on the mini series is having a consistent workout routine.
Building a
consistent workout habit. If you guys do have other habits that you think are foundational or you want to learn more about, send us a DM at Girls Schools Pod on Instagram, or either of our personals at Catherine Canine, at Caroline Canine.
Yeah, make sure you're following us on all of those accounts. Anyways, if you want some behind the scenes of the podcast, you want to get involved, ask questions for the podcast, and also follow along our personal lives on our socials. Make sure you're following the show wherever you listen, on Spotify, on Apple, on YouTube. Subscribe if you're watching, and we love you guys. We will see you not even next Monday, but on Thursday for the first kickoff of our mini-series.
Bye.
Bye.